Good morning, everyone. You have tuned into the FDFN with me, DJ Jasmine, and today we'll be covering on validation of aseptic manufacturing, particularly on the aspects of process validation and the media field studies. And today we have with us a special guest, Dr. Dexter, all the way from a far, far away land. Hi, Dr. Dexter. How's your day today?
I'm good, How are you?
Yeah, fine as well. So, have you had a breakfast?
Sure, I have. Have you?
Yeah, I have it as well. Okay, so back to the topic on process validation. I understand it is actually an action taken to demonstrate and provide evidence that a process will, with a high degree of assurance, consistently achieve the desired and intended results. Am I right to say that, Dr. Dexter?
Exactly. And if I can add up to that, it actually involves the systematic study of the systems, facilities, and processes to determine if they perform the intended functions adequately.
Oh, alright. Okay, let's move on. Do you mind sharing with us what are some of the significance behind process validation?
Well, process validation itself is a part of good manufacturing practices, abbreviated as GMP.
Okay.
It ensures drug quality, safety, and efficacy, as well as ensures confidence in manufacturing process.
Oh, okay. However, I realize that it has its limitations as well, right?
Of course, like other methods, this product is also has its own limitations. Well, the product quality can be adequately assured by the process and the product inspection, as well as it requires tight control during processing.
Oh, okay. So let's move on. Let's talk about the components involved in process validation. What are they actually, Dr. Dexter?
Well, the overview of the process validation has three parts. Firstly, there will be the process design. Secondly, process qualifications. And thirdly, continued process verification. The first one, process design, actually define the commercial manufacturing process based on knowledge gained through development and scale-up activities. The second one will be the continuation of the first one, which is to evaluate process design and determine if the process is capable of reproducible commercial manufacturing. And lastly, the continued process verification is to gain ongoing assurance that the process remains in a state of control during routine production.
Oh, okay. So to keep it short, let me reiterate. It actually consists of three components: the process design, the process qualification, and the continued process verification. Oh, hold on. I think we have a call coming in.
Hello.
Yes, miss.
Hi, I'm a pharmacy student doing a dosage form design module. So can I ask Dr. Dexter a question?
Yeah, sure.
May I know what are different types of process validation?
Well, that's a very good question, pharmacy student. There are actually 5 types of validation. Firstly, the pre-validation, the prospective validation, concurrent validation, retrospective validation, and revalidation.
Dr. Dexter, maybe you want to elaborate more on each type of validation?
Well, of course, firstly, the pre-validation is actually conducted before the process validation. It consists of 2 parts. Firstly is the installation qualification, abbreviated as IQ, and secondly the operational qualification, abbreviated as OQ. The installation qualification is actually to demonstrate and certify that the equipment is properly installed, while the operational qualification is actually to demonstrate that the equipment will perform consistently and within predefined limits as specified and installed. Secondly, the prospective validation, which is the preferred method, applies to new processes and equipment. It is normally completed prior to the manufacture of the product during development stage. It involves the risk analysis of the production process, and if the process is satisfactory, if the results is acceptable. Unsatisfactory process must be modified and improved until a validation exercise proves them to be satisfactory.
Oh, okay. How about concurrent validation?
Well, concurrent validation is done during routine production on processes. It is considered acceptable for processes with testing history indicated consistent quality production. It is feasible when non-destructive testing is adequate to verify that products meet predetermined specifications and quality attributes. It is normally conducted on existing, previously validated process.
Okay, next, how about the retrospective validation?
Well, retrospective validation is interesting because it's already quite obsolete nowadays. It is based on analysis of accumulated historical data of earlier manufacturers. It applies to existing processes that have not undergone formal validation, so it's only acceptable to well-established processes.
Oh, okay. So, Dr. Dexter, you actually mentioned that this retrospective validation is quite obsolete. So, does the WHO still encourages it?
Well, that's an interesting question as well. So, because WHO no longer encourage retrospective validation, especially on manufacturing of sterile products.
Oh, alright. And the last one is the revalidation.
Well, the revalidation is to ensure that the changes in process and the process environment, whether intentional or unintentional, do not adversely affect process characteristics and product quality. So it actually applies to existing processes and equipment. It is normally done on a routine basis or when there is an introduction of any changes affecting a manufacturing and standard procedure. So it is the sum total of all validation data that provides the necessary level of assurance for aseptically produced products.
Okay, so right now, let me just check again the pharmacy student. Did Dr. Dexter answers your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Dexter.
Okay, thank you, pharmacy student.
Thank you.
Okay, right now, thank you everyone for tuning into DFT FM. We will be having a short commercial break, and after that, we'll be talking more about the media field studies, also known as the process simulation. So do stay tuned. Thank you for staying with us. Hope you have enjoyed the song by Kenny G. So moving back to the topic on aseptic manufacturing, right now we'll be touching on process simulation. So before the commercial break, we have been talking a lot about process validation. So how exactly do we carry out process validation? So right now, let me get Dr. Dexter to share with you guys a little bit more.
Well, process validation can be carried out by using process simulation, also known as media field study. Some of you might ask, what is media field study? So it is the performance of an aseptic manufacturing procedure using a sterile microbiological growth medium in place of the drug solution. So the media field should emulate the regular product field situation in terms of equipment, processes, personnel involved, and time taken for filling as well as for holding.
Oh, okay, that's very clear. So what exactly is the purpose of a media field study?
Well, the purpose of media field study is actually to evaluate the aseptic assembly and operation of the critical equipment. Secondly, it also qualifies the operators and assess their techniques. And lastly, it demonstrates that the environmental controls are adequate to meet the basic requirements necessary to produce a sterile drug by aseptic processing.
Oh, okay, that's quite a huge chunk of words. How about, to put it simply, it is to test whether the aseptic procedures are adequate to prevent contamination during the actual drug production. Is that right, Dr. Dexter?
Well, yes, exactly.
Okay, let's move on. Let's look at the procedures involved in the media field studies. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that, Dr. Dexter?
Well, sure. The procedures following a media field study, there are actually four. The first one would be the simulation, followed by incubation, and afterwards interpretation of results, and lastly monitoring. So simulation is a microbiological growth medium is processed and handled in a manner which closely simulates the routine manufacturing processes. And the incubation is the sealed containers filled with medium are then incubated under prescribed conditions and then examined for evidence of microbial growth. While the results are then interpreted to assess the potential for a unit of drug product to become contaminated during actual operations, for example during startup, sterile ingredient additions, aseptic connections, filling and also closing. And lastly, the monitoring, which is the environment, personnel and installations are strictly controlled to ensure the consistency of the overall aseptic conditions of the manufacturing process.
Oh, okay. So to reiterate, the procedures involve simulation, incubation, interpretation of results, and monitoring. Okay, moving on, let's look at some of the factors to be considered in a media field study. So for each of the factors, Dr. Dexter will actually provide us with slightly more explanation. So firstly will be the medium culture.
Well, medium culture is a selection of the nutrient medium should be based on dosage, form of the product and ability to support the growth of a wide variety of microorganisms, including aerobic bacteria, yeast and molds.
Oh, okay. And for the second one will be the incubation method.
Well, there's a divergence in industry practice in the selection of incubation conditions. A typical incubation is performed with the container in the upright position for 7 days at 20 to 25 degrees Celsius and then inverted for a further 7 days at 30 to 35 degrees Celsius.
And the third being the fill volume.
Well, the fill volume is the volume of media filled into the containers need not be exactly the same as the routine fill volume. It should be sufficient to contact the container closure steel surfaces when the unit is inverted and swirled, and sufficient to allow visual detection of microbial growth post-incubation.
Next will be the number and frequency of runs.
Well, the initial validation should be performed with 3 consecutive satisfactory simulation tests per shift and repeated twice a year.
Okay, so following on will be the line speed.
The media fill should address the range of line speeds employed during production.
Following on will be the acceptance criteria.
The target should be zero growth, but a contamination rate of less than 0.1% with 95% confidence limit is acceptable.
Next will be the container size.
Well, the extreme of size containers should be considered. The largest container often has the largest opening, so the potential for microbial entry from the environment should be the greatest for that size. The smallest container represents the greatest handling difficulty. The smaller containers are more fragile and less stable and be more subjected to breakage and jamming in the equipment.
Next will be the number of units filled.
Well, the number of containers used for media fills should be sufficient to enable a valid evaluation and reflect the actual batch size.
Following on is the operator shift.
Well, each operator performing aseptic processes are requested to participate in media fill.
Okay, and then the duration of fill.
In a general, media fills should be long enough to include all of the required interventions and stoppage and should reflect the potential operator fatigue. A typical media fill might be at least 3 to 4 hours long.
How about the worst case scenario?
Well, it should take into account various interventions known to occur during normal production as well as worst case situations.
For monitoring,
That one is to be microbiological monitoring, which is air, surfaces and personnel, and particle monitoring should be performed during media fill.
last but not least is the interpretation of results.
Well, the positive results is indicated by presence of turbidity, which suggests microbial growth. Negative results indicate absence of turbidity. This does not necessarily assure zero contamination in the process. For example, there is the possibility that the growth mediums used may not be support the growth of anaerobes, resulting in acceptable level of sterility in the aseptic manufacturing process.
Bravo! That's a very long and clear explanation on the key factors in considering in a media field study. Okay, lastly, Dr. Dexter, maybe you want to share with us what are some of the limitations for a media field study?
Well, I can think of 3 limitations of media field study right now.
Okay.
The first one would be that it does not define a sterility assurance level for every individual product that underwent the validated process. It only increases the confidence level of the sterilization process. Secondly, it may produce false negative results. For example, incorrect type of growth medium used, difficulty in simulating actual conditions. For example, operators will be aware that they are under test and hence be more careful during media field studies as compared to during routine production. And lastly, in the case of filtration simulation, the media field does not validate the ability of the filter to sterilize growth media. However, a robust media field study does provide a tool for validating the processing steps used to manufacture a sterile product and is one part of a necessary overall quality assurance program.
Thank you, Dr. Dexter, for your time and sharing with us about process validation and process simulation. I hope that everyone now have a clearer understanding on the aspects of aseptic manufacturing. Thank you for tuning into DFDFN. Do stay tuned tomorrow for more news regarding aseptic manufacturing.